Imagine you're a 60-year-old grandmother trying to buy an animated classic to enjoy with your family, but instead you get one of these. From a Christmas special all the way to a hentai, this video is about how companies have historically tried to create illegitimate sequels to Disney's Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs to varying degrees of success. And by that I mean from mild profit all the way to outright complete destruction of the company producing it.
So there was this company called Filmation that started in the late 1980s, and they had a pretty simple goal. Let's make sequels to Disney movies, and people at the grocery store will buy them thinking they are official. They started in 1987 with a movie called Pinocchio, Emperor of the Night, which I don't want to get into right now, but it has this horrifying scene where Pinocchio is forcibly transformed back into a puppet as he screams and cries, and an old man laughs at him. It's kind of messed up, and I'm sure you're thinking, why would this be in a kids movie? And you're right, and that's the mood you need to be in for this video. Okay, so that was 1987. It's clearly an unofficial sequel to Disney's Pinocchio movie. It starts out with Pinocchio as a human already, but they turn him back into a puppet so he can relearn the same lesson, and it ends with him becoming human again, making it just kind of pointless. Well, in 1990 they made a sequel to Snow White called Snow White Happily Ever After, and it was released in France. We're going to look at this movie in more detail in a second, but I want to help paint this picture.
Snow White began production in 1936 and was released in late 37. And as Brian will mention later on, it was the first full-length animated feature film. Except it wasn't. It's the first important one and the first one of high quality. However, there's technically a few animated feature-length films that came out before it. So that's a little bit of a misconception that people have. It was predicted that will cost $250,000, which is around $5 million today, but it ended up costing $1.5 million, which in today's money, obviously adjusting for inflation, is $30 million. Just as a reminder, Spider-Verse costed $90 million, and it was made just a few years ago. And keep in mind that the most expensive movie in that era was around $3 to $4 million. So it's a large risk that Walt Disney was willing to take to invest in such a project when it was never done before, and his company was mostly doing shorts about Mickey Mouse and other now obscure characters. However, it did pay off, as in America, Snow White is the 10th most profitable movie of all time when adjusted for inflation, and the most profitable animated movie. But this is mostly because in between the 30s and the 90s, it kept being re-released in theaters. With that being said, it's still a very impressive feat from this 80, almost 90 years old movie. To recap Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, Snow White's stepmother, the Queen, has a magic mirror which can answer questions. And she asks the mirror, who is the most beautiful woman? When the mirror answers it's Snow White, the Queen gets jealous and she sends a hunter to kill her. Fortunately, the hunter doesn't have the cruelty to do it, so he lets Snow White go and ran away, and lies to the Queen that he actually killed her. Snow White eventually finds a house in the forest which belongs to 7 dwarfs, which all have distinct personalities that I'm not gonna go into. After seeing her and seeing her beauty, they decide that she can stay in the house as long as she does the chores and work in the house, basically. Meanwhile, while everything is happening, the Queen finds out that Snow White is still alive from the mirror. After the dwarves, I think it's the next day or maybe a few days later, go to work, the Queen disguises herself as an old woman and makes Snow White bite a poison apple, or better said, she tricks her, poisoning her and killing her. When the dwarves come home to save her, they are about to gang up on this old ass woman, but fortunately she ends up dying by falling off a cliff when they are running after her. Later, The dwarves think Snow White is too beautiful to bury, so they put her in a glass casket. Then this weirdo prince, who we see like 10 seconds in the beginning of the movie, kisses the dead body of a literal teenager, and that somehow makes her come back to life. And I assume after that, they live happily ever after, which is the title of the movie we're talking about today. So that fits well. And this is mostly the original Snow White. This is a brief recap of the whole movie.
Walt Disney was incredibly protective over Snow White because that was the first feature-length animated film.
Except it wasn't.
He was also, oddly enough, very protective over Alice in Wonderland. He tried to make that into a feature for decades before he got done in 1957. But yeah, so anyway, Snow White, 1937, 20 years prior to Alice in Wonderland. We're not talking about Alice in Wonderland anymore. Snow White, 1937. Disney will never do a sequel to Snow White. It is one of the only Disney animated movies to never get a direct-to-video sequel, and it's part of Walt Disney's last will and testament that it never will. I think it was right next to the part of cut off my head and put it in a block of ice underneath my theme park. I don't know the exact specifics, I don't have Walt Disney's will in front of me. But hey, remember the Disney Vault? For those of you who haven't read your history, this was long before Disney Plus and The Mandalorian or Baby Yoda or whatever. One of Disney's original plans was to re-release their movies in theaters every few years, so people would pay to see it all over again. The original intent behind Fantasia was that they would swap out some of the musical segments so people would have new things to look forward to in the middle. It was a pretty sound business strategy, and also why they were so reluctant to even have VHS tapes in the first place. History is amazing. Side note, I'm calling this right now, shows will be taken off of Disney Plus and be put on a rotation just to try to sell DVDs and Blu-rays. We all know it's going to happen, I'm calling it right now. Wow, a lot of tangents already. What am I building up to, right? Am I right? Okay, so the year is 1993. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs is the first movie to be scanned into digital files, first animated movie digitally restored back to its original splendor. Disney was so excited they put the movie back into theaters to show the world. They announced the project months ahead of time because it was a technological wonder and they were very excited. So while they were doing that, Filmation has had this Snow White sequel for like 3 years, waiting for the perfect time to release it in America, and when you know it, with just the right amount of time to plan it out, they released it in theaters right next to the original Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Isn't that amazing? You could go to the theater and ask for a ticket to Snow White, and if you weren't paying attention, you could go see Snow White Happily Ever After instead of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. I mean, they both sound real, and the Disney classic does end with them living happily ever after all, and it's the 90s, girlfriends. No one really had internet yet. Wow. So Disney sued them. They don't exist anymore. The company of Filmation that put out these movies does not exist anymore. They only put out 2 movies and now they're gone. So that's cool. Okay, so, Snow White Happily Ever After. What's the plot here? Well, in broad strokes, it goes like this. Lord Malice was the evil queen's brother, and after she died at the end of the other Snow White movie, he's not very happy. He talks to the magic mirror, looking glass upon the wall. Queen's dead.
Yeah, that's I know. Oh, what the hell? That was scary.
And he finds out that she died because of Snow White. So Lord Malice is like, I have to kill Snow White, and I will do so by turning myself into a dragon, which is something I guess I can do. The owl and bat named Scowl and Batso are Team Rocket for the movie. The villains that don't really do much but act as comic relief so the audience doesn't get too scared.
What the hell? That was scary.
And trust me, without them, this movie will be horrifying. Remember how they weren't in the Pinocchio movie? Yeah, that one's awful. Okay, so the owl smokes cigars and the bat is also there. That's all we really need to know about them for now. So Lord Malice Dragon attacks Snow White and Prince is like, dude! And uses his +5 crossbow to try to fight the dragon, and it's all pretty crazy. The owl in the back end the way of the dragon and Snow White escapes. Lord Malice is pretty pissed though, so he straight up kills the prince. Just kills him. Man, crazy. Snow White wanders into the woods for a while, which is a reference to the 1937 movie, but not done as well. I mean, animation is hard, guys, and wakes up in the cottage of the Seven Dwarves. But hey, it's the 90s. What if instead of some smelly old men who don't like soap, what if the dwarves were strong, independent women? Enter the Seven Dwarf Elves.
We're their cousins, the Seven Dwarf Elves.
They mentioned they were the Seven Dwarfs' cousins, which is a fascinating line to me because it implies little people give birth in litters. Now, I've never known a little person, so I don't know if that holds true or not. But these aren't your ordinary seven-related, short, strong, independent women, because they are also magic. You see, Mother Nature, who was played by the late great Phyllis Diller, granted each of the seven dwarf elves with magic powers, like Funshine, or Bedtime, or Vaporeon. They're essentially the Care Bears. This one's even a furry. Look at her nose. Thunderella, and she is basically the main character from here on out. She has the power of using lightning. For example, during the final conflict in the movie, she will use lightning on a dragon. But right now, she can't use her lightning very well. She has a beautiful Disney-style I Want song, designating her as a main character. Main characters get to sing their emotions during their introduction to establish their goals for the story. Her song boils down to, if you guys can use your powers to do great things, then I can. I can. Do it right. It's pretty good. Too bad Mother Nature has summoned her to a tribunal to decide if she deserves to have lightning powers. And now this part of the video is where we have to address the elephant in the room. You ever notice that every other lightning-based character in fiction is black? Black Lightning, Static Shock, that whole tribe of guys in Naruto. Garnet from Steven Universe, Storm from the X-Men, Aqualad for some reason, Miles Morales, Spider-Man, Electro, and Amazing Spider-Man 2, Black Lightning again.
I need to stop you right there, Brian. There isn't any tribe of black people with lightning abilities in Naruto. There is the Land of Lightning, which is a country that has as capital, if you want, the Hidden Cloud Village, where, yes, the leader of the village, every time it's a black dude with lightning abilities. The first Raikage, A. The second Raikage, A. The third Raikage, A. The fourth Raikage, A. Yes, all of their names, it's simply A. And the fifth Raikage, who is Darui. Yeah, we got some diversity.
It's weird, right? Like, I'm not the only one seeing this pattern, right? I mean, is Mother Nature taking Thunderella's powers away because she's not? Oh, this is a weird topic. Okay, so Lord Malice shows up and he and Mother Nature start fighting and we find out his powers are not natural, meaning he can't be affected by Mother Nature and she can't affect him. So the plot of the movie is now, hey, if you can go beat up Lord Malice, you can keep your powers. Okay, cool. This doesn't seem to affect Snow White at all, even a little bit, since the prince is dead and everything else, but she's not really the main character anymore, so whatever. So while they go on this journey, they're followed by Orko from He-Man, and he doesn't say or do so much, but the Dwarf Elves quickly start calling him the Shadow Man, which sounds racist, but okay.
Get that Shadow Man!
So we do that typical D&D thing where they have a few encounters, and each one is almost specifically designed so one of their skills is necessary to move past it. Oh, Dark Cave? What if girl who controls light, you know, controls light? Wild dogs? Maybe our ranger can use her +5 to animal handling to figure out what's going on. Hey, even the narcoleptic one woke up for that one. Nice job! Her only lines in the entire movie. What's that? You want to know what's going on with the owl and the bat? I'm glad you asked. Lord Malice has some extra time on his hands and doesn't like the owl because of, you know, the thing earlier, so he tied him up over a boiling pot in a death trap activated by this candle burning through the rope. Pretty epic. The bat comes and saves the day so the owl is free, and it really makes you wonder how any of this is related to Snow White at all. The D&D party makes it to Lord Malice's castle just as the bat and owl are leaving, and we get like one wacky interaction before the bat and owl are gone until the end of the movie. They picked up the Sunshine one and dropped her. That's it. We have some wacky hijinks with those monsters that were at the beginning of the film, and it amounts to literally nothing, and then Snow White wakes up. I've watched this movie hundreds of times, and let me just say, they never showed her falling asleep. She wakes up on the cold hard ground and no one asks why she was sleeping there. No matter, because the prince is here now. Yep, with his weird smirk and his grabby hands, and he's forcing her along while she's struggling, and oh man, no. Don't like this. He drags her up to the top of the castle past all these broken statues and shows her a big bed-sized pedestal with her name on it. Getting some Pinocchio vibes. I Wonder what was going on in Filmation Studio that led to this sort of scene being so prevalent in their films. It might actually be due to the studio being French, which sounds like another wacky, oh haha, Brian doesn't respect other cultures bit, like with Australia. And yeah, it does sound like that's where I'm going, but consider the DVD commentary to the 2008 French-American film Igor, where the director says he made sure that the film was being partially made by the French due to their more lax policies in regards to children's entertainment. Mr. Leondis brings up this point during two important scenes of the film. During the part where Scamper the Rabbit is shot through the head, we get a close-up scene of his gory viscera brain reforming, and later on when Igor totally fills up this woman's breasts. One of the characters was suicidal throughout the entire film. That movie's amazing! Leondis says that you want to be able to do these things in an American film. The French have a much more open dialogue when it comes to sexuality and violence. So is it any wonder why these French movies depict scenes indicative of... I don't know, man. It rhymes with grape.
Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's got the most beautiful eyes of all? Snow White. Snow White.
Just 2 tiny drops of eye dew for beautiful eyes in seconds.
Mirror, mirror on the wall, now who's got the most beautiful eyes of all? I do. No, I do.
Also, this movie has a game. It was made for the Nintendo Entertainment System. Sorry, Super Nintendo Entertainment System. And I don't know how well it did. Probably not very well, because the movie didn't do too well itself. And it's basically a platformer. You could play either as the Shadow Man or Snow White, and it's basically the plot of the movie. You probably wouldn't know from the game, because the game doesn't have cutscenes or anything. This game sucks, okay? It's not a good game. I haven't played it, but I've watched the whole playthrough of it, and it just looks like the most boring, joyless experience you could have. And I think they're planning of making more games about this movie, but, you know, their studio got fucked up.
Anyway, yeah, it totally wasn't the prince at all. It was Lord Malice in a prince disguise.
What the hell? That was scary.
And now he has a magic red blanket that, if it goes on top of you, it turns you into stone. Snow White, along with the audience, starts connecting the dots and realizes that all the broken statues along the way were those living and breathing monsters at the beginning of the movie, and that Lord Malice has been systematically turning them into stone and breaking them. He is a murderer. Also, this is poor storytelling. You don't introduce a crazy powerful weapon like this in the final minutes of your movie. You're supposed to introduce it at the beginning so the audience knows what kind of stakes we're dealing with. This is Chekhov's gun, man. It's simple. Okay, so there's a struggle and the Shadow Man tries to stop Lord Malice and gets knocked out. Lord Malice does the laser eye trick, which is really weird and drawn out, and I don't like it. It's happening, even. It's kind of hilarious. The dwarf elves patiently wait their turn, and then all try to attack at once, and Lord Malice is like, but what if blanket? And turns 6 of them into stone! He starts approaching Snow White with the blanket again, and we cut to Thunderella. She finally understands what I have been saying this whole time. She used lightning on a dragon! I'm so proud of her. Here's some things about lightning. Okay, this guy's name is Roy Sullivan. He was struck by lightning on 7 different occasions, and survived all of them. People called him the human lightning rod. Do you think maybe he had some kind of innate electricity powers like in real life, but lacked the necessary melanin levels to... Great line, Brian! Fantastic! A bolt of lightning is roughly 5 times hotter than the surface of the sun, which is pretty impressive when you think of how often lightning storms happen. It's also 3,000 times slower than the speed of light, which is why we can see it. Pikachu uses lightning a lot, but he is a cartoon character and not real. Most strikes just go cloud to cloud, with only about 25% of lightning ever actually hitting anything. Usually it hits things called a lightning rod, which is used as a way of deflecting dangerous electricity into a large grounded area to alleviate possible damage, but sometimes, if we're lucky, it will hit a dragon and stun him mid-transformation while he's turning into stone! I like to imagine years down the road some adventurers find the ruins of Lord Malice's castle and there's a huge plaque next to the dragon statue. Although some of the letters are faded and moss covers up big chunks of it, I hope that these words read clearly. She used lightning on a dragon. Oh, and it turns out the Shadow Man was the prince the whole time, and he wasn't dead. He was just black and missing some fingers, so that's really weird. And they take the owl's cigar away and stomp it, and he's immediately cured of his smoking habit, that happens in real life. If you ever see somebody smoking, just knock it out of their mouth and then step on it, and they'll instantly thank you. Make sure to do that to your abusive parents.
I was surrounded by females at my house. Surrounded was very easy. There were two of them, my daughter and my wife. My son wasn't living at home then. He'd already left. And Erica once said to me, when we had somebody trip and fall in a show that we were doing, there was the girl, I think it was the Hardy Boys, and she said, why do the girls always have to slip and fall and the guys never do? I said, well, let's do one where the guys slip and fall and the girls never do.
Thought this was over. It isn't over. Because there's one more thing to talk about. The original rip-off sequel by Funimation. Yes, they didn't try to capitalize off of Snow White once, but twice by making an illegitimate sequel. Exactly. And it's funny because the second time they did it, you know, Happily Ever After, is the movie that basically made Disney say fuck off, which is funny. But at the same time, it's kinda unfortunate because Happily Ever After, it's such a better movie and has such better animation and everything when you compare it to this piece of shit, okay? I'm sorry. This is a Christmas special made in the 80s on a low budget. You know this is going to be bad. And you know how I know it's going to be bad? From the start. Because even though this movie, it's about Snow White, it's actually not about our Snow White. It's about her daughter, also called Snow White. What? What is this? Why would you call your daughter Snow White when your name is Snow White? And why is her hair actually white, but yours isn't? Her dad's hair is not white. Why is she white? What is happening? And if you thought this wasn't enough, remember how in Happily Ever After, the queen apparently had a evil magic brother the whole time? Remember how that was a thing apparently? Well, in this movie, she doesn't. There's just another evil queen just hanging around, just in a ice thing, and she's basically the same character, but like she's not technically. So yeah, why have any creativity or integrity when you can just copy everything but to make it shittier? Because of course they would. They didn't even explain who the hell she is really. She's just another evil queen, just some other evil queen. Or maybe, I don't know, maybe in this universe, the evil queen just didn't die. She just become an ice imprisoned thing or something. I don't know. And things don't end there, brothers and sisters and others, because there's not only the 7 dwarves and the 7 dwarfettes, or whatever their name was, but there's also the 7 friendly giants. Yes, if you want to consider all those 3 movies kind of like a trilogy, kind of like a continuant universe, like the Snow White ripoff cinematic universe or something, there's the 7 dwarves, their cousins, the 7 dwarfettes, and their other cousins, the 7 friendly giants. Meaning that their family, all of their families, just breed into 7 pieces. Like all of them, just 7. It's like a rule. I don't know why, but it's always 7. It's always happening. It's always 7. And at least in Happily Ever After, the dwarfettes were actually pretty interesting and not a total ripoff of the dwarves. Like they had new weird Care Bear-like powers. Like, each one of them was basically a Care Bear, as Brian mentions it. But the 7 friendly giants are just total ripoffs. The only difference between them is that those guys are tall and the dwarfs were very small. Oh my god, that's so hilarious. That's so epic. You're so smart. You're so smart. This ripoff is so smart, Funimation. How are they not sued? I mean, I know they get sued for Happily Ever After, or for something else. I think it was for Happily Ever After. However, this movie is way more stupid and of a ripoff than Happily Ever After, and it's less creative in every way and worse in every way. But hold your horses, because in this movie, the queen also makes 7 demons or dragons or whatever to fight the giants. So there's another group of 7 people or 7 creatures in this universe. There's 4 so far, okay? If anyone wants to come up with some other sequel ripoff to Snow White that continues from Happily Ever After or whatever, I'm gonna be happy, okay? Just make it continue, bro. Just make the wheel spin, you know? Ripoffs after ripoffs. Let's go. Cinematic universe, MCU level shit, bro. MCU level shit. So midway through making this video, I've discovered another ripoff sequel. Well, I don't even know how to describe this one. It's kind of a sequel, but also it's complicated. It's very complicated. And you know something? Just listen what I'm gonna say about this movie and what you're gonna see on screen. You're gonna be baffled by this movie's existence. And of course, it was French. You know, what Brian said earlier about the French, he's not wrong, I don't think.
The movie starts with Snow White and the prince coming back from the events of the original Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs. The prince takes Snow White to his house in the forest where they have sex. After that, the prince is not really satisfied with Snow White, I guess, so he goes back into the forest, finding a castle, and sees the Sleeping Beauty. Which means he's the same prince that kissed a dead Snow White to make her come back to life, as well as kissing Sleeping Beauty to make her come back from sleep. Which just makes it weird, because it means this guy just goes around and kisses girls without consent, and I'm pretty sure all of them are underage, by the way. So not really a good look for this prince.
So basically, the prince is about to freak Sleeping Beauty, but I think she has some sort of father-daddy fetish or something, because she keeps calling him daddy and comes prematurely. You can even see the painting of her dad on the wall looking at her like, what the hell? What is wrong with my daughter? And that's a painting, it's not even him. Oh yeah, and also she loses consciousness during it. Meanwhile, she had this whole ball, this whole celebration planned for the night. You know, before she died of cooming. And I guess the prince just goes along with it even though she's passed out. And here we see the other fables like the 3 pigs, the 7 dwarfs come back, and blackmail the prince. We have Beauty and the Beast, and the Beauty also wants to freak the prince, but he lays his eyes on Cinderella. Yes, Cinderella, it's also here in this movie. And speaking of her, do you remember the fairy that helps her, you know, get dressed and stuff in, you know, Cinderella? Well, in this movie, she's kind of a overweight old woman who also wants to have sex with the prince. So basically Cinderella and a bunch of stuff throughout the movie is just an overarching plot of hers to have sex with the prince. Speaking of which, Cinderella and the prince get some time together. The prince tries to get in her pants, or I guess in her dress. And ultimately, he kind of succeeds and has her on the bed basically, and he's about to freak her. And I think he even started freaking her, if I remember correctly. But guess what? Sleeping Beauty was ironically sleeping in the same bed, because it's the same bed where she had sex with the prince as well. And then she kind of wakes up, or at least sees them, and starts attacking Cinderella. And they kind of start killing each other, to the point where I'm pretty sure Cinderella almost killed her. Like, it was very close to killing her. But I'm pretty sure she was saved by the fact that it's like 12 o'clock, or almost 12 o'clock. So Cinderella, you know, has to leave, because otherwise she's gonna turn back to her normal self. So she leaves, like in the story, leaves a shoe behind, a crystal shoe or whatever, glass shoe, whatever it's made of. But the plot twist in this one is interesting to say the least. I can't tell if this is supposed to be progressive or conservative, because it turns out that Cinderella was actually a guy. Yes, instead of being a little, poor girl, with shitty clothes and that probably smells because she hasn't taken a bath in like 5 months. In this version, originally Snow White is just a guy, which is, I guess, interesting to say the least. The prince caught up with her, or with him, whichever pronouns they prefer, and sees that they're not a female, they're a male, but with a magic transformation, and basically leaves them and goes into the forest, or goes back, or whatever. In the forest, he finds Sleeping Beauty again and kisses her. But wait, how is Sleeping Beauty here, you ask? Well, she's actually not Sleeping Beauty. She's just the horny fairy that wants to have sex with the prince and smooches him a little. And if you ask me, good for her, okay? This guy keeps going to like random princesses and kissing them and probably doing some other things non-consensually, so the fairy doing it to him, I don't feel that bad. Freak this guy. Meanwhile, Cinderella, or Cinderelle, I don't know, goes and finds her other shoe, and that's where she transforms back into her female appearance. And the actual Sleeping Beauty cuts her and imprisons her. Oh yeah, remember that this movie, it's called Snow White? Well, yeah, she finally comes into play. I think I already told you that there's a plotline with her that I don't want to talk about because it's very weird, but to put it a certain way, the Sleeping Beauty sent the huntsman from the Snow White story after Snow White to capture her this time. And basically, Sleeping Beauty has both Cinderella and Snow White hovering above a bunch of lava, and she's about to kill them. But meanwhile, the prince had sex with the fairy and stole her magic wand. So now he's going over there, and basically he goes there, saves the day. I think he makes peace between all the other princesses. I'm gonna be honest, I kind of gave up on the movie. I wasn't listening anymore at that point. But I'm pretty sure all the princesses made peace between each other or something, and they killed the fairy, and he's going with Snow White back home. He doesn't want to be a fuckboy anymore. I think, at least. Again, I wasn't paying attention. This movie sucked me dry, and not in the way that you would think this movie would suck you. You will not believe what happened. It is unimaginable. I was literally about to upload the video, keep it unlisted for a few days, and then put it on public. But guess what? I found another one. I found another movie. another one of those dumb, horrible sequels to Snow White. And this one is by far the worst. It's not even close. I was speaking on the previous ones, not knowing what horrible movie would come out of this video. I never expected a movie being this bad. The voice acting, it's horrible. The voice actors for those characters should be trialed for crimes against humanity. That was the worst thing I've ever heard in my life. The animation is cheap and ugly and it's kind of scary. Okay? It's so bad it makes me scared. The sound design and everything looks like unfinished, not looks, but sounds unfinished. And the message of the movie is very strange. And I mean, let alone the characters and the plot not making a lot of sense and the scenarios they're in. But like, there's this one moment in which Snow White, everyone says she's the most beautiful woman in the world. And then this witch is like, I'm gonna make you look average. If you help this little girl find her father, because that's the plot of the movie. This girl wants to find her father, which disappeared, and she finds Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and they take her in, and then they help her find her father. Basically, this witch tells Snow White, look, I'm gonna help you find this girl's father, but you have to literally give up being the most beautiful woman in the world. You're just gonna be average looking. And they make it seem like such an emotional moment. They're like, the little girl is like, no, don't give up your beauty, you're the most beautiful, oh my god, no, you can't look average. And I'm like, what? Why is that more important to you than your father? And they treat it like, oh my god, she's not gonna be the most beautiful woman in the world. Oh my god, she's gonna be average looking. It's like, what? What a weird lesson to give children. Yes. Family members are not as important as appearance. Yes. If you look average, that's worse than your father missing or something. I don't know. It's a very weird movie. So yeah, eventually they go. Her father was trapped by a evil queen. Another one probably. Every one of those movies has another evil queen. And the movie ends and it was horrible. Okay, this movie is horrible. It's the worst movie I've ever seen. I'm not joking. This was truly horrendous. People on YouTube have made better movies than this piece of dog shit. 1 out of 10. Never watch it again in my life. Now that we talked about the movies, we will rank them from worst to best separately.
Yo, what is up? It's your boy Brian here with all these Snow White sequels ranked in a numbered list. Down at the bottom at number 5 we have Snow White, the Mysterious Father, or in its original Chinese, Bai Shui Gong Zhui... Bai Zhui Gong Zhu Ji Shen Mi Ba Ba, which tells the story of Hannah finding the mysterious father, and also Snow White is there. I find it really funny there are so many Snow White sequels where Snow White isn't really that important in the plot at all. At number 4 we have Snow White the sequel, a French hentai that features the 7 bad dwarves named Horny, Grungy, Scummy, Filthy, Funky, Spotty, and Mental. And it's just sex scenes. The entire thing is just pornography, and I don't really understand the point. Like, is this hot? Do people think this is sexy? So in cartoon fairy tales get at it like this? Like there's a Rocky and Bullwinkle cartoon that shows fairy tales getting in bed with other fairy tales, and that came out in like 1959. Granted, that used fairy tales like Princess and the Frog and didn't try to crib off previously existing Disney movies, so maybe that's why this French film exists, I guess? Look man, if you want to see Rule 34 of Disney princesses, the internet already exists, and this movie came out in 2007, so like the internet already existed back then too. And to penultimately, we have number 3, Snow White Christmas.
this. I really want nothing more than to sit you guys down, pour you a nice big mug of hot cocoa, and go off on this movie for ages. The plot makes no sense. To start with, if Snow White is the mom, and her daughter is also named Snow White, this would imply that the prince either took Snow White's last name in the marriage, which would be very progressive for the time, or that Snow White Jr. is a bastard child born out of wedlock. The fact that the evil queen is alive still causes continuity problems, not only with the Disney film it's ostensibly a sequel to, but also with the other Filmation entry, due to the explanation of the magic mirror being the source of her magic and being destroyed near the end. You have the 7 giants, but only 2 of them have any personalities. One is Tsundere for Snow White Jr. and gives her a fucking cuckoo clock to sleep in for a few nights, and one is gay. Those are the only 2 memorable giants. Tsundere 1 tries to sacrifice himself to save the bastard girl during a flood, but due to the animation of the scene, it's very obvious that there were like a million other things he could have done besides hold on to a shovel while he drowned, such as place her on either side of the river. The multiple nights Snow White Jr. spends in the giant's house being chased around by the evil queen turned into a cat are straight out of a Tom and Jerry cartoon, which makes sense for coming out just after the 1970s ended. And Snow White Jr. being able to make her Christmas wish at the end is just so heartwarming. The kids have a playhouse. Woo. Here we come to the final stretch. Coming in at number 2, we have the classic Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs. Not much to be said that hasn't been said already, so I'm just going to mention the 2001, the DVD had like a minecart game where you played as Dopey, and the animation had a weird combo of like early 2000s CGI and 1930s animation. And finally, for number 1, Happily Ever After. I talked enough about this movie, so I don't have to give any more reasons why. You all know it's because I want to fuck the Shadow Man.
Get that Shadow Man!
I think to me the worst one is the Chinese one, the Mysterious Father one. It's so bad, the message is horrible, and I mean from animation to voice acting, everything is horrendous about it. I think it's one of the worst movies I've ever seen in my entire life. Above it, I would say way above it even, is A Snow White Christmas. It's a horrible movie that I don't really like at all, but at least is better, and it was made like 50 years before the Chinese one, and it's still way better. On the next place is the sequel, the French one, the basically porn one. At least it's more ambitious and tries more than the others, and it's not as horrendous as I thought it would be. It is bad, it is not good, but at least it tries to do something that I haven't seen in a lot of rip-offs, so I give praise to that. Also, the animation and art style aren't even that bad. I think the second one is Happily Ever After, the best rip-off of all. This is the best ripoff of Snow White I've seen, and it's a pretty decent movie actually, it's not that bad. It's not great, but at least it has a plot, it has characters, it even adds new characters. The dwarf females are actually more important and more interesting than in the original movie the dwarfs were, so that's interesting. And at number 1, it's the original Snow White, because even though it's like 8 years old, the animation is still good, it has a plot, it has a villain, they're all established and well done. And that's enough. It's a decent movie, and that's enough to put it above the others. And at number 0, as the best Snow White movie, is
Morbius. I got that acrimonious odious, cause the bats are copious, my blood flows harmonious, about to act felonious. You know they hating us, and you're getting treason us. Ooh, when they get bit with the Morbius. I got that acrimonious odious, cause the bats are copious, my blood flows harmonious, about to act felonious. You know they hating us, and we're getting treason us. Ooh, when they get bit with the
Morbius, 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 Morbius.
His name is Dr. Michael Morbius.